Recording in progress.
There it goes. There was lag time hitting the record. That's always a lot of fun because then the podcast host can have a little moment of panic of like, is the tech going to support us today? But luckily it is. And not only is it supporting us, it's supporting all of you out there, you listeners to the show. Thank you for tuning back in to The Broken Brain. I am, of course, Dwight, your host for this week's look at psychology and culture. And today, it's always the aim of the show that I try to bring messages that are very important. And today is no exception to that. In fact, I think this will touch in some ways every single person who's listening out there. This is something we all deal with, which is achievement, goals, stress management, and also one of the big focuses that I love about my guest's message today is perfectionism, and also kind of what to do about it instead of just feel bad that you have it, which is another form of perfectionism, I guess. So my guest today is Mary E. Anderson, a PhD clinical psychologist and the author of The Happy High Achiever, 8 Essentials to Overcome Anxiety, Manage Stress, and Energize Yourself for Success Without Losing Your Edge. So Dr. Anderson, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Dwight, for having me here today. I'm excited. I'm excited to talk with you. Thank you so much.
Why don't you start out by just telling everybody a little bit about who you are and what made you get into this funny business that we're in of psychology, therapy, and now also, of authoring as well. I don't mean to presume, by the way. I don't know for sure that this is your first book. A lot of times I don't know that. I just don't look it up.
Yes, this is. You're right on. This is my first book. I'm so excited about it. So I'm a licensed clinical psychologist for well over a decade now. And I was working for years and seeing these phenomenal clients come in, just talented, ambitious, amazing individuals, so successful business professionals, doctors, lawyers, grad students, lots of law students, and they just really weren't enjoying their excellence. They would come in and they would describe really struggling with chronic stress, anxiety, self-doubt, worry, perfectionism, burnout. And I kept teaching the same strategies. So the strategies are CBT strategies, so cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. And cognitive behavioral therapy is an empirically supported treatment for anxiety and depression. And I kept teaching the same strategies. There were certain types of thought patterns and behavioral patterns that I kept targeting. And I am an efficiency-loving lady, Dwight. I thought there must be a book out there that I can recommend, right? So that they can be reading these things at home as well and having strategies. And there really wasn't a book out there that targeted CBT strategies for ambitious people with jam-packed schedules, right? So I can't be, encouraging them, go home every day, take a 2-hour bubble bath. That would not be practical, right? So I decided to write one. And so that's The Happy High Achiever is my book, my first book, The Happy High Achiever. It comes out September 24th. I'm so excited, 2024. And it's a practical guide detailing 8 essential principles to help ambitious people reduce their stress and anxiety and enjoy both happiness and high achievement. So it's really actionable science-based strategies and skills so that busy people can start implementing and immediately benefiting from the strategies in the book. I'm really excited about it.
I love, and this is something a lot of guests that I have on have in common, and I really admire it, which is to say, I can't find this resource, I'll just make it. And that is inspirational in and of itself. And I think that also goes towards the credibility, and just talking with you now, it supports, as I'm reading the book, I can tell that there's an understanding you have of saying, obviously you're a high achiever. You have your clinical practice, you're writing this book, you're creating resources when they're missing, obviously. And I really like the focus that you put on this of what's in the title, but you just said a minute ago, enjoying your excellence. And
yes,
I think enjoying life, unfortunately, oftentimes when we have a drive to make our lives meaningful or successful or move towards our goals, it gets in the way of enjoying the if you're a kind of person who makes stuff happen or wants to make stuff happen, you're also more at risk to say, I'm not that person, or I don't give myself any credit, I guess would be one way to say it. But frankly, also just not being happy, even though accomplishing things.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the essential number 7 is celebrate the victories. And especially exactly what you're saying is that people will achieve, it's in the name, high achiever. So they'll set these goals and accomplish them, but often they lose the joy in it because they're just right on to the next thing. It's just on to the next. So it's like, okay, what's the next project? What's the next, case? If it's a lawyer, what's the next case I have to win? Or what's the next deadline I have to meet? And they're not pausing to celebrate, wow, something I just, was trying to achieve. I did it. Right? This thing that was just an idea in my head, I actually brought to fruition. And there's so much power in taking a moment and just really taking in the good. That's what's going to fuel us and energize us to fuel ourselves forward to additional successes. But it's really like if you just hiked up a huge mountain, right? You're not just like, okay, now I got to hike back down. When you're at the summit, take in the air, snap some pictures, eat a snack, refuel. And that's something I see too, is that my high achievers, they're so on to the next. They're not taking that pause to celebrate and to refuel, to keep moving themselves forward. And if we're not fueling ourselves with good self-care, that's really what can contribute to burnout long term.
It reminds me of something. I have a colleague of mine who said that for a long time he felt like graduate school, especially, he was like me, working in the mental health field for years at an undergraduate level, and then finally getting into saying, getting the therapy license and all this. And he said that whole process to him felt like a really exciting novel that had a really lackluster ending. And it's an interesting thought, because I think there's a truth, to saying, does my passion wane? And particularly when we get into maybe the mediocrities or the little bits that are hard, and then we get focused on those because they're hard and we have to, and then also, this level of expectation. And I believe it is not only individual that we do to ourselves. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. I think there's a societal focus on increased productivity and perfectionism and goal reaching that is oftentimes very destructive in the way that we execute it.
Yes. I'm like, yes, I can't agree with you more. Yes. Yes. I think there's so much pressure. I think people are putting pressure on themselves. And also there's this societal pressure. I've seen so many issues, I think really fueled by social comparison. So, people looking at social media. And even if they say to me, Dr. A, I know that's, those are posed pictures, but they're still taking it in. And social media really is like a curated highlight reel, right? It's all the big wins, but it then distorts people's thinking. They start thinking, oh, people just effortlessly move from win to win. And then they feel less than about themselves. There's this, this kind of underlying, thoughts of inadequacy or deficiency about themselves. And the issue is not that we want to strive to do our best. That's awesome, right? So I talk about strive for excellence, not perfection. The problem comes in, what I see, Dwight, is the problem is when people are tying their self-worth to their achievements, their appearance, their performance. That's where the trouble is. Because I often say to patients, if you make your internal worth beholden to external validation, you will live with chronic anxiety. It really is. If you're making your internal worth beholden to external validation, you will live with chronic anxiety and worry, because you'll always think that you have to hustle to earn and prove that you're worthy and that you're lovable. And that's a human basic need. We want to belong. We want to feel lovable. And so that's really the issue that I see with so many of my high achieving, talented patients.
It's a pretty powerful principle. And I like the framing of excellence, because I think that comparison is a double-edged sword, because it gets us both ways. The natural tendency to say, oh, I looked at this thing on Instagram and boy, everybody's out there and they're vacationing at a villa and then they're, killing it over here. And here's my laptop by the pool. Look at my work-life integration. And I think that But then on the other side, oftentimes the gut level reaction people have to try to fix that is we say, nah, their life's probably all screwy. But I think that's dangerous because then we set up an expectation that if their life isn't actually completely different from the good picture, what if I find out someone I know who I'm jealous of, they really do seem to be nailing it in these areas where as far as I can tell, I can't find any big flaws. So therefore now I go back to feeling bad about myself. And you're talking about kind of trying to find, it seems like, a more internal definition for what is excellence. That's probably a good question. Is that what is excellence and how do I pursue that in a way that is healthy?
Yes, absolutely. So I talk about this in my book, The Happy High Achiever, in terms of an excellence equation. And it's really about making mind, body, spirit, right? So in terms of being happy, healthy, and high achieving of paramount importance. So being happy, that does not mean that you're going to be happy in every moment. I think that's really important. Research actually shows that if you focus on moment to moment happiness, it actually decreases your well-being, because then there's almost like this kind of this erroneous kind of like happiness goal that we feel like deficient if we're not meeting, right? So when I say happy,
failing at being happy. Yeah,
exactly. That's like perfectionism in a nutshell, right? So it's not about being happy every second, but it's about recognizing that we have the power to optimize our thoughts, our behaviors, and that's going to really help us feel better, right? So a sense of contentment, a sense of moving through various emotions. So we don't want to eradicate feelings. We want to just help them feel more manageable, right? So we're going to feel anxious. We're going to feel sad. That's totally normal. But when I talk about being happy, I just talk about having a balanced view of how you're going to move through emotions. And then healthy, making sure we're taking good care of ourselves. I think so many high achievers believe that they need to sacrifice their well-being and put off any self-care, until, after I finish this project, Dr. A, then I'll take time off, or I'll start getting more sleep after I'm done with this, big presentation. But that's just not going to be how it works. So for excellence, we got to know how to focus on our self-talk, so our thoughts, our self-care, our behaviors. And then in terms of high achievement, I really encourage people to think about what are meaningful goals, right? So things that honor your highest values. What are meaningful goals that you can strive towards in a healthy, doable way? And I think when we have that focus, happy, healthy, and high achieving, that mind, body, spirit kind of holistic view of excellence, where we absolutely are striving to be our best, while also allowing for our humanity. I think that's such a key. That's something I see a lot. People think that they need to be without flaw or fumble, these flawless presentations, never failing. And that is just not a realistic expectation. So it sets people up actually to fail and to limit themselves. People who are trying to be perfect will absolutely limit themselves because they're afraid to take risks. They are going to probably overwork, and often in inefficient ways. What I see, Dwight, is that sometimes people will like hyper focus on details, like the minutia, because they're so afraid of everything not being perfect, or they'll procrastinate. And that one I see a lot too, which is perfectionism fueled procrastination. People become so overwhelmed that it's not going to be perfect, or like, my boss has to be totally blown away by this. They won't even start because they're so overwhelmed with anxiety.
I've noticed that with creative endeavors as well, or especially when there's an overlap. I know for myself, one of the things that kicked off actually starting the podcast, the advice that I heard was someone talking about it. I think this touches a lot of things: a business venture, a project that you're doing, and certainly when it's something that is going to be available on the internet that people can go and listen to and say, "What an idiot!" Trust me, reviews. You can see both sides of that, and it's and then to overattach to this idea of like, well, I got to make sure it's all polished and so I heard someone say this, that when you are creating something and doing something, you should embrace the fact that when you look back on it later, you might say, "Ooh, that's not nearly what I would produce now." but also to appreciate that you would not produce what you're producing now if you hadn't done that in the first place. And it's like trying to embrace the anticipation of imperfection, to say that, that will get me through to where I want to be, if that makes sense. And I think that's kind of on the page of what you're talking about.
Absolutely. Wisdom, that it's a process, right? And especially creative endeavors, in business, it's iterative, right? We have to allow for the process. And I think so often what happens when people are striving for perfection, they will become very attached to the outcome, right? They want the outcome to be a certain way. And they forget that there's real value in the process, right? There's value in the skill sets we develop, the things that we learn, just the character. I call it earned courage. I think we earn courage as we grow and we go through the process of, endeavoring to do things that stretch us. There's inherent value in facing things that are challenging, right? And so if we're just thinking perfection is outcome and very much focused on people pleasing. So if the outcome is, I need everyone to think this sounds awesome or looks awesome, you're really going to stymie your forward progress. So if you yourself can say, you know what, my goal is to make progress. So it's progress over perfection. It's progress over people pleasing, which is a huge issue with high achievers often looking for that external validation.
How do we recognize when perfectionism is coming? There's certain times where we, I think, are acutely aware of it, but then there's oftentimes there's such a pressure to not be perfectionistic and to self-accept that I think one of the effects of that is we learn to pretend we don't do it, to say, well, I know I'm not perfect, but then I go on for 5 or 10 minutes about my imperfections and how they make me suck and I'm terrible and the world's terrible and life's terrible. And I don't know. So I think there's a self-denial where perfectionism becomes sort of like sneaky or covert in our lives. Do you find that? And how do we figure out that that's there?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Yeah, there's nuance to this one, right? So I'm like, let's dig in. Okay, so first of all, I think how you feel will absolutely be something that's an indicator. So what we know from cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, the approach I use with patients, is that thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are all directly related. So I'll sometimes put my hands up into like a triangle. And so at the top point is thoughts, on the like the left corner is feelings, and then the right corner is behaviors, right? And then you have bidirectional arrows in between. So they're all directly related. So if we have perfectionism going on, you'll often feel really anxious. So you'll feel anxious, you'll feel overwhelmed. That's one indicator. Right. So if you're thinking, so perfectionism, honestly, where I think the root is a thought of, I need to be perfect to be worthy, right? So I am not okay as I am. So it's kind of a thought that's at the real root. There's this thought of inadequacy or a thought of deficiency that I need to prove my worth. So that's the thought. That's really the basis of perfectionism. And so when you have that thought at the top of the triangle, on the left-hand corner, the feelings, you're going to start feeling anxious, overwhelmed, tense. So you might notice often I'll, see patients, their shoulders are up to their ears, or they'll have a lot of tension in their jaw. And they'll have like headaches and gastrointestinal issues, different things like that. So tummy problems. So you'll start feeling tense, nervous, anxious, overwhelmed, sometimes even dreading having to go to work or things like that, or dreading going on dates because they think they need to be perfect if they're trying to partner up. So you'll feel the anxiety. And then behaviorally, what you'll see, and this is where I would say some concrete indicators, if you're starting down the perfectionism road, you'll start to see that self-care goes to the wayside. So they start, because if you think about the thought is, like, I'm not worthy, I have to prove my worth. So if you think that behaviorally, are you going to take great care of yourself? Probably not, because you're just trying to please other people. So that's where I work on balancing out people's thoughts and really, having them come to an understanding like you are worthy of taking care of yourself by virtue that you're human, and that self-care is not a luxury. It's a necessity because you're human, and it's really strategic. So here's the thing, behaviorally, self-care is strategic. If you want to be a sustainable high achiever, so sustainably happy, sustainably high achieving long-term, you have to prioritize self-care. So if you see self-care behavior start going by the wayside, that can be a signal to you, am I, putting in longer hours? Am I trying to prove myself in a way where I'm actually neglecting my own self-care? And I have a handy little self-care acronym that I use with patients to help them have concrete indicators. So I can share that with the listeners if you want to hear the little self-care acronym.
Definitely do. I loved that when I was reading that in your book. And it tied in with this. I love the story you gave, by the way, of someone saying, yeah, my self-care is I'm finally going to get time to vacuum my house. Anyway, I just love that. I'm sure that comes up in the acronym, and you're like, is that really? Yeah.
Yes, I love that. And that one has resonated with so many people because I think high achievers, again, like you were saying, are so productivity focused that they often actually struggle sometimes with even, planning pleasant activities. So the self-care acronym that I came up with is literally SELF, S-E-L-F. So S is for sleep, and we want to aim for 7 to 9 hours a night of sleep. And I think a lot of people know the importance of sleep, and we know what it feels like when you don't get good sleep, but it's just so much research has shown that chronic lack of sleep negatively impacts things like memory, attention, concentration, relationships, mood. So getting good sleep is so helpful for productivity, for mood, for memory and concentration. So getting 7 to 9. And what that means on a practical level is if you know you need to get up at 6 a.m., you got to have lights out and be asleep by 11, right? And that's where it gets tricky for some of my high achievers is they're like, well, but I need to keep pushing to get this project done. So they'll stay up till midnight or 1, especially if they're staying up till 1 and they got to get up at 6. 5 hours is just not going to be a healthy amount of sleep, especially chronic lack of sleep is super detrimental.
And that's a thing that oftentimes you see where people are like, and in fact, it's lauded. I know some self-help books and things that would say things like, well, if you don't believe you can get up at 5 a.m. look at that hour you're losing every day and you wanted to add exercise, then cut into your sleep time. And that's been advocated over time. I mean, I don't want to hit on any really well-known habits of successful people advice that we're or whatever books we want to say. No, but that's been a sort of conventional wisdom for a long time of like, well, why can't you get up and just kill it at an earlier time? And we don't balance that with like saying, oh, I guess that would mean you need to go to bed earlier. It's more of this obsession with, Yes.
Yeah, absolutely right on. So that I would say if you want to strive to get up at 5 a.m., great. But just make sure you're going to bed at 10 p.m., right? Or before. So that's the key. If you want to get up earlier, I also really encourage people, you're the expert on you, right? So like your biorhythms in a way no one else would. I have some people who are like, Dr. A, 5 a.m. ain't never happening. And I'm like, I get that, They're like, no, 7 a.m. Okay, that's cool. So if they know that, just make sure you're getting 7 to 9. But really, to be balanced about it, prioritize the sleep, and it's better to get to bed and wake up with that enhanced clarity and focus that you'll have after a good night's sleep. And so the little quick pro tip I use on that one is have a fixed wake time, right? So it's it sounds easy, but it really is transformational for sleep. Just pick a time and stick to it, right? So fixed wake time so that every morning you're getting up at the same time. So if it has to be 6 a.m. for work, keep getting at 6 a.m. The thing that I see, Dwight, is then on weekends, right? So if Monday through Friday, patients are waking up at 6 a.m., but then on the weekends, do they want to get up at 6? No. So what they're doing though, is they're getting up at 9, or 10. So 3 or 4 hours later. And what happens then is it's like, I call it like self-induced jet lag, essentially, right? So it really is great if you can pick a fixed wake time within about a half an hour, right? Within about 30 minutes wiggle room time. But if you're getting up 3, 4 hours later on the weekends, what that's going to do is, are you going to be tired at the same time those nights? No. So it's going to push your bedtime. It's going to make it harder to get up the next morning. And it really just throws off people's sleep schedules. So aim for 7 to 9, have a fixed wake time. Super important to get sleep. The E of self is exercise, right? And I think we all know this, that it's so important to move our bodies and, 30 minutes or more most days of the week. And I'm a huge believer in walking. I think people vastly underestimate walking. I love it because it's phenomenal for stress management. It's low risk of injury and it counts. I think a lot of high achievers think like it has to be high intensity. And if you can do high intensity workouts, awesome. But if you're not exercising at all, it's much better to just make sure you're getting some kind of movement. And for stress management, it's so important because the physical activity exercise helps lower cortisol, stress hormone, right? So cortisol and adrenaline, when we're stressed out, happens. And so to be able to manage that and especially to decrease the cortisol, we gotta have physical movement on the regular.
I just had noticed a video the other day that a friend of mine, Nikolai Blenau, she's been on the show a time or two as a therapist back in Rhode Island, and she had posted this video about getting up and walking around her office building in between sessions, just to do something, and how. And you look at, and I've heard this from kind of like fitness experts and stuff, where the vast majority of people do not enjoy going to like a gym. That's why gym, for those who don't know, the business model of operating a gym is that you plan on 70 or more % of your clientele never coming in the building. Otherwise, it would be too expensive to maintain the machines and things like that. And so anyway, but that's why, is because we feel like we have to, and then and this, I think, is one of the highest risks of this over perfectionistic, is not only that we burn out and all those things, but we don't do the things at all, which you can mention earlier, right? Is like, I sign up for this thing and I make this goal and I do this, and then I don't do it and I feel bad about it. I didn't do it. And so then I don't do anything else, and we don't problem solve.
You are right on it. Yes. So that's totally true. Is this all or nothing kind of cognitive distortion I talk with a lot of people about? Is so this all or nothing thinking that really does not help our cause, right? So they're like, Dr. A, I need to go to the gym every day. But then the one day they don't, which of course is going to happen because we're human. So maybe we're traveling, or maybe a meeting, suddenly gets scheduled, or put on our schedules. And so we have to remain flexible. So in my book, The Happy High Achiever, I talk about how to keep self-care doable, right? It's so imperative that we keep self-care doable so we can keep doing it, right? If we're rigidly adhering to this like fixed mindset of what self-care, should be, we're not going to be able to, meet those goals that are just unrealistic for everyday human life, and especially high achievers who have jam-packed schedules. So for exercise, I really encourage, keep it doable. Try to find something that you enjoy doing, or at the very least, don't hate doing, because we're human. We're not going to keep making ourselves do things long-term that we really don't like, or that feels like deprivation. So for exercise, I really encourage, find something that you don't mind doing and that feels doable, right? So I talk about, literally the pro tip on this one is just a walk and talk. Literally get on the phone. I talk to one of my best friends, Julie, on the phone. And even if it's bad weather outside, just at home, I'll walk around and I can get thousands of steps racked up just by having a great conversation. I don't even notice I'm doing it. I just make sure I keep moving, keep walking as I'm talking with her. And it's thousands of steps. Right. And so that was an enjoyable way that I was able to move and get some exercise in. And people are like, Doctor, does that count? Yes. Literally anytime you're moving, it's going to help your body and brain. You're going to feel those endorphins. You're going to have a decrease in cortisol. Again, chronic elevated levels of cortisol is so unhealthy for our physical and mental health. So exercise becomes so important. And then L of self is look forward. And this is one of my favorites. And this is the one that you were mentioning there, where I'll talk to, clients and say, okay, we have to help you have at least one pleasant activity to look forward to, because it's such a powerful mood booster. We know from research that just the anticipation of something positive is really powerful. So that same area in your brain that lights up that pleasure center when you're engaging in a reward behavior is the same part of your brain that will light up when you're just anticipating doing a reward. So like a classic example is when you're planning a vacation you're so excited about. I'm not even in Hawaii yet, but I'm thinking about Hawaii. I'm thinking about, the beautiful blue skies and the like wonderful water and the lush landscape, I'm already happy just thinking about it, right? So most high achievers, when I ask them, how many pleasant activities do you have scheduled this week? What is the usual answer on this one?
It's like, well, it's none, I imagine. I mean, I think, and it's so funny how you can go week after week after week without noticing that, especially those of us who are maybe in the ADHD range, we already have time blindness. And all of a sudden it's like been a year and there's nothing, never a trip or a break or whatever, right? Yeah.
Yes.
I'm interested to see if I'm correct. Is it not?
Yes. High five for Dwight. Yes, you are 100% correct. People
now
say
I can feel good about myself because I was. Oh wait,
you can always feel good about yourself. You are awesome. So the answer is absolutely zero. So people, I'm like, so you have nothing to look forward to. So of course they're going to start feeling burnt out because it's like they wake up, they go to work, they come home, and it's just this monotonous cycle. And so just even having something small, like, so a vacation's awesome. And if we can plan that, that's wonderful. I like to keep it really doable where we usually can't go on vacation, but what could we do? We could plan a phone call with a friend. We could plan a meetup with someone on the weekend. We could, even if it's like, I'm going to get my favorite takeout on Friday for dinner, or I'm going to, make sure that I queue up one of my favorite, Netflix binging shows and make sure I watch an episode tonight. Even if today is going to be busy, I'm going to, watch one episode tonight. So keep it super doable and stay flexible with it, but have one thing that you can look forward to each week, right? And so that's where I'll have people be like, well, I have been meaning to vacuum, Dr. A. And I'm like, well, do you enjoy vacuuming? Like me personally, not so much with the vacuuming. I don't really love it. So the key is that you're going to look forward to it, right? So vacuuming might be a helpful activity, but if it's not something that you're looking forward to, that's not going to give that mood boost, right? So we want it to be something you're actually going to look forward to that doesn't feel stressful, something that can easily put into your week. And that's something that you can actually, like, kind of a little bonus boost is if you put it in your calendar, like in your phone, or if you use like old school paper calendar, write it in, like, oh, that's right. Like, so write in, I have that concert I'm going to this Saturday. So literally remind yourself on like Tuesday and Thursday, where it pops up on your phone, like looking forward to the concert on Saturday, or like, oh, I get to hear this person play on Saturday. And it really will give you that little mood boost. And think of how easy that is to just put it in your phone that you have something to look forward to. So that's a really concrete indicator. If people come in and all they're focused on is work, they're not sleeping a lot, they're not making any time to exercise, there's nothing they're looking forward to, that's when I'll start asking them about, what is their thought process? Do they think they need to, prove that they deserve self-care? Are they kind of in that perfectionistic mindset? So it's a concrete indicator. And then the last of the self acronym is F, which is fuel. And this is stuff that we know is important: hydration, eating healthy foods. So that does not mean never having a hamburger and fries. It just means getting really strategic and knowing lean protein, fruits and veggies, water. These things are just so important for our physical health, also for cognitive performance. I think sometimes people don't think about, for cognitive performance, what you intake is your fuel, right? And it makes sense when we think about it, like after, a big Thanksgiving meal, do we feel like going to do work? No. So like, big meals not going to be helpful. But conversely, if people aren't eating often enough, and this is what I see when I'll have students who are studying for a big exam, and they're like, but Dr. A, I have to be studying every second. I'm like, we got to have you fueling yourself, right? So small mini meals of just like whatever that works for them. So have some almonds, some walnuts, bring pieces of fruit, whatever works for you, but just make sure you're fueling yourself forward. And the other type of fuel I talk about sometimes with high achievers, that they go, oh, I didn't think of that, is just fueling your mind. Fuel your mind with some quiet. Think about as high achievers, right? We're constantly barraged with problems to solve, information coming in on our phones. And so even literally a moment or two of just quiet, right? So like a minute or two a day of some kind of quiet. So deep breathing is something I teach often. There's meditation, there's journaling, just being out in nature with your phone off, right? We know, or even just silencing it for like a minute or two where you're out in green spaces or blue spaces. We know from abundant research that being in green spaces, just even if it's your backyard with, trees and grass, or in a park, or blue spaces near ocean or rivers or lakes, it has a calming effect on our nervous system, which is really going to help us manage stress. And that's so key. If you want to be a high achiever in the short term and long term, we have to find doable ways to manage our stress effectively. So we don't burn out.
How you say that, because a lot of times another obstacle that comes up is time and money and things. And you're talking about finding things that it's not money dependent. It's like, I have to have something, right? And many of the things you say, whether it's going for a walk, talking to a friend, those kinds of things, or, I noticed a long time ago that if I wanted, because I really enjoy, like, whether it's playing board games or Mario Kart's a big fixture, like with my kids and stuff. It's like, do we do the dishes first and say, well, probably do that, and then it's bedtime? Or do we say, you know what, there are some nights where we need to just do that before the dishes or something, and because otherwise it never happens, right? And then all of a sudden, the cat's in the cradle, whatever, all of a sudden, time goes by.
Yes.
and all that. So yeah, it's a powerful kind of shift. I like how when you're talking about the sense of accomplishment then loops in, not just am I making progress in the goals that we all think about, but that if I can tie in my own health and happiness as part of that excellence, then that's the goal of accomplishing. And I think that's one of my biggest takeaways from what you're saying, is evaluating ourselves not on accomplishment, but on the health and happiness that we're adding to our lives, that we're maintaining that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Because I think it's all so connected, right? So when we are taking good care of ourselves in terms of self-care behaviors, and I love that idea of fit in Mario Kart. I love that. High five, Dwight. I used to love that game, and calendar it in, right? So I love what you're saying too. Keep it doable, calendar it in, and say, okay, tonight we're going to play Mario Kart before we do anything else to make sure it happens. Because I think you made a great point, the whole cat's cradle thing, where if we don't make the time, it won't happen. That's why I really encourage people, calendar in when you're going to do self-care. Even if that's just a quick 15, 20-minute game of Mario Kart, if it's not in our calendars, if we're not really strategically, intentionally adding that into our week, we're not going to do it, because we're going to, do our other work, things or household chores. So just like you would a meeting or an appointment, to schedule in your self-care is huge. So when we're taking good care of ourselves behaviorally, when we're really being aware, what are we telling ourselves, right? And so that self-talk that impacts our mood, the litmus test that I often will put out there is, would you say it to a friend? So when you notice what you're telling yourself, would you say it to a friend? And often, I'll have clients say, no, I would never say this, because they're saying things like, I'm such a loser. I can't tell you how many clients I hear. I'm so behind, Dr. A. I'm so behind. I should be further in my career. Everyone else is partnered up and I'm not, so they're feeling less than. They're focusing on what they haven't done yet, what they haven't achieved. And so I'll ask them, like, would you say that to a friend? And when they say no, I'm like, okay, then we got to work on that. So if we help them optimize their behaviors, optimize their thoughts, that self-talk, then they're going to feel better. And I truly believe people deserve to feel good. We're made for joy. I truly believe. And so if we really prioritize taking good care of ourselves behaviorally and with our self-talk, we're going to feel better. And that's what's really going to help propel us forward to be our best, so that we can achieve whatever meaningful goals we want to for ourselves. And really, so we'll benefit and the world will benefit when we're living our best. And
one of the great things, and I'll encourage everybody out there to check this out. I've read the book to prepare to talk to you, and it's one of the things I like about talking to creators and especially authors, is that I get to read these things that I might never even know are there. So getting people out there, I like that. I like to showcase books that not only say, here's what you should do, but they say how to do it actively. And there's a lot of exercises and things that you have in there that are that are wonderful things that people should do. I'm so grateful to be able to be to talk to you about this, and I'm grateful for the work that you're doing to help people do this. I know that it's something I'm benefiting from this conversation and reading your book, and so that's enough for me. But hopefully, also people out there, you'll take advantage of this opportunity too. Before we get into where people can, the best place to find the book and to find you, would you take a minute to share with people? I would like to ask about some method of giving back to the community and getting involved. It can be a charity or nonprofit or just a good human-to-human practice. What would you share with the listeners?
Oh, this is a fantastic question. I love it. I think there's so many things that I could highlight. So there's like Save the Children, there's Habitat for Humanity. I think what I would put out there is to each listener out there, think about today, in this very day, is there something you can do to connect with another person? So I talk about in my book, The Happy High Achiever, micro moments of connection, right? So this comes from the work of Dr. Barbara Fredrickson. She's amazing. But this idea of just micro moments of connection. So when you're out and about, hold the door open for the person, who's walking in through a door, hold the elevator door for someone who's rushing to get in, smile at someone, say hello, say please and thank you. And these things might sound so small, but it really can make a huge difference, I think, in the lives of others. Just saying to someone, it's so nice to see you. What I've realized from, helping patients for well over a decade now, you saying, it's so nice to see you today might be the nicest thing that someone hears. And I think that there's such power to just what seems like simple acts of kindness. But I think it really needs to be highlighted that if each one of us takes it on as our commitment to be kind to someone, that there's this really positive ripple effect that can happen and spread kindness. Hopefully throughout the world. My goal is to help as many people as possible. So starting with kindness and what we can do is one way that I highlight for people.
It's a great practice, as you put it, because it's exponential when other people, if we're all, like you said, if we're all doing it, it's happening a lot. And so to not discount just our own efforts. Also, that's one of the things I've noticed that, man, it feels like a great gift to receive. But for some reason, we really discount the value of it when we give. It's like, boy, think of someone doing that for me. Oh my gosh, it's fantastic. They listened and they cared. But then we see other people and we're like, well, I don't know. I didn't really do anything. We just talked and I listened, but blah, blah, blah. And so it's important to remember how much good that does. So thank you for sharing that. Tell people a little bit about where can they follow your work? Where do they find you? And is there a place that is the best place for them to buy your book that is better than others?
Thank you so much, Dwight. This is awesome. So yes, my book is called The Happy High Achiever. It's on Amazon and all major booksellers. As of September 24th, 2024, it will be out there. I hope it helps a lot of people. There's a lot of actionable strategies, like you were saying, where people can immediately benefit from implementing them. And it's very doable. So science-based, but doable within busy lives. And my website is www.maryandersonphd.com. So MaryanDersonPhD.com. So they can go on there, find resources, more information about me. They can sign up for the newsletter. I'm also on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. So let's stay connected. I would love to hear from the listeners out there. And the goal is that it'll be a series. That's the hope, is that this is the first book of many to come. So I would love to hear from the listeners what really resonated with them and what they'd like to hear more of, because I just want to specifically target the information so that it will be the most useful and help the most people out there.
Wonderful. Thank you. One quick reminder for all of you out there, all you listeners, is that in connection with charities, we like to highlight a charity local to some local area. That's what local means, everyone out there, in case you were, not to show off, but that's what local means. Anyway, this month, the month of September, we are emphasizing the organization Horses of Hope, which is horsesofhopepr.org, a therapeutic riding center, does equine therapy, and it is located in Isabela, Puerto Rico. And so that's one. You can go to their website and you can get involved and check there. quick reminder as well that if anybody is thinking of joining the Broken Brain Patreon for some of the bonus materials, you get videos of our interviews and also the weekly history of mental health updates and stuff like that. If you do join, then half of your donation every month will go to supporting the show, and the other half will go to Horses of Hope. If you join in September, it'll go to that highlighted charity for as long as you are part of the Patreon. So that's just something that everybody should know about out there. And thank you for listening, everybody. And Dr. Anderson, thank you so much for being here. And once again, thank you for writing the book, because I think that it will make a monumental change in a lot of people's lives in a culture where we oftentimes focus on our failures more than our successes. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here, Dwight. This was awesome getting to talk with you today. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for what you do and putting all this information out there for the listeners. It's phenomenal. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Courtemp Arts Podcast Network. To listen to more Courtemp Arts shows, visit courtemparts.com.
Hello. I am so glad you're here. Welcome to the To Mom is to Love podcast. My name is Valerie Probstfeld. I am a nurse practitioner as well as an imperfect mom who loves. In fact, I thought I would be an A-plus mother before becoming a mom. However, as the years passed, I realized love is the only thing I can control. In fact, the verb to mother means to love. Merriam-Webster defines to mom as to give birth or rise, as well as to care for or protect. And just think about it. Love gives birth, allows ourselves and families to rise, and enables us to care for and protect. We have more power as moms than we realize. In 5 generations from now, you will have approximately 30 descendants, and the number keeps getting larger and larger. Motherhood is the most important job in the world. Our mission is to support, encourage, and empower each other as imperfect moms to love as a verb. Come join us as we navigate our shared name, live our verb, and rediscover our identity. Please subscribe, share, and follow. And I would love it if you leave a review so more moms can come join us. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, as well as TikTok and YouTube. Please follow along with us on this beautiful journey we call motherhood.